at West Side Decorating Center. Good morning to you. Welcome to the first hour of the Art Lewis Show. Later on, after the 10 o'clock news, we'll talk about Michigan Works with Pam O'Loughlin from Michigan Works. At 11 o'clock, we'll learn about the Bay County Commission on Aging. But for this hour, we're going to have some fun because you hear this guy regularly on Behind the Mitten, and he, for many, many years, was in the newspaper business, if you will, and now is the Director of Communications for the Saginaw Diocese. We call him Gonzo. He is the one and only John Gonzalez. John, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Art, and so happy to see your face and your smile, and so happy to be here with the listeners of this great heritage radio station. I mean, I travel the state and love radio. I've always have since I was a kid, listening to Ernie and Paul on my transistor radio back in the day, right?
Those were the guys.
And I said, you know what? That's what I want to do someday. And and then when I travel and I run into different markets, Saginaw has always had a soft spot in my heart, because that's not far from my hometown of Capac, right? Cows and pigs and chickens, right? And but it has a soft spot because of you and this station. Like when we got a chance to be on WSGW 10 years ago for our Behind the Mitten radio show, I was like, "Are you kidding me? We're going to be on WSGW? No way!" Right?
It's it's interesting being at a heritage station because there's not many of them left.
They're not.
And you wake up every morning going, "Okay, I'm still here." So John, he has no idea what I'm going to talk about, folks. He thought we were going to talk about one thing, but it'll probably be something else. But before we get to that, you're heading down to Tigers tomorrow, are you?
Yeah. So last year I got caught up in. I've always been a lifelong Tiger fan. You heard me say Ernie and Paul, and lifelong Tigers fan growing up. I wanted to play professional baseball as a kid. Tried out for the Yankees. I'll tell you that story someday. So I realized baseball wasn't going to be my career, but lifelong fan. Always wanted to have season tickets. But, living in Grand Rapids, that wasn't going to be a possibility, right? So when I got this job in Saginaw last August, I said, well, hour and a half isn't too bad of a drive to get to Comerica. What if I, got a partial season ticket? So, I bit the bullet. I have every Friday night home game for the whole season, and then they give you 14 other games throughout the season.
That's
so
cool. That's great.
Going to opening day as a fan.
That hour and a half, have you really driven to Detroit that much?
It can be a little longer sometimes.
It can be a little longer sometimes. No doubt about it.
I'll be smart.
No doubt about it. It's interesting. So you're not going to wait till later. You might as well tell us the Yankee story since you teased us.
Oh,
now I would guess you've tried out as a catcher.
Good. That's a good guess, right? I was a few pounds lighter back when I was 18 years old, and my coach called me up one day and said, "Hey, I'm sending you to Port Huron," and I said, "Oh." I go, do we have a game there? He's like, "Nope, you're going to go there at 9:00 in the morning on a Tuesday or whatever." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I got a call from the Yankee scout, and they're going to have their scouts are going to be there, and it's going to be a Yankees day, and they want you to try out." And I said, "Me?" And they're like,
"What did you play?"
I was a first baseman, pitcher, and sometimes an outfielder. I ended my career as a DH.
That's interesting.
That's a different story. But first base pitcher, and I said, "Do they want me for my pitching or do they want me for hitting?" He's like, "Gonzo, whatever gets you in. Don't even talk about
this." I played when I was young, in my teens, and I played baseball. And it wasn't my main sport, but I pitched and played short. Those were my positions. My main sport back in the day was tennis.
Really?
Played a lot of tennis. Yeah, I love tennis.
Wow. Well, there's some similarities there. You're swinging a racket.
Well, you're swinging.
Swinging a bat. You're
trying
running.
to hit a ball.
You're trying to hit a ball at incredible speeds. But, so I tried out. So the way these tryouts worked back then is they had the first level. Say, would they put you through drills and so forth.
Like a Columbine,
Like
right?
a Columbine, yeah. And they try to see what, where you excel at. I was only throwing maybe probably mid-70s, so my pitching wasn't going to work out.
Yeah.
And then, that hitting, I got a few hacks up there, and then they break you up into two teams, and they'll have you do a scrimmage. I did not make the two-team cut. My career as a professional baseball player at that point was over.
Yeah.
That's it.
But, it's a life experience, isn't it?
It really was. I mean, but it helped transform my life because when I went to Central Michigan as a freshman, because that was during the summer going into my freshman year, I said, okay, I'm going to stick with this journalism radio track because, I mean, this is really where my calling's at, right, is to work for a newspaper and maybe do a little radio here and there. And maybe, who knows where
you
where
followed
goes.
that track, though, didn't you?
I did.
So
yeah.
why journalism? What drew you to journalism?
Well, this is a fun story because when I was in 7th and 8th grade, my dad was working. He was working for Chrysler Corporation down in Detroit. And he would say to me, he would get our hometown newspaper, the weekly newspaper, and say, there's nothing in here about the Hispanic and Mexican communities, you know? And he says, plus I can't really read it very well.
Which is your heritage.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. And I'd say, Dad, no, there's nothing in here. And he's like, well, I'm going to go talk to the editor of the newspaper and tell him he needs to have something in here for the Hispanic community. And I'm like, oh, okay. And didn't think much of it. And I'm like, wait a minute, Mom, is he really going to go to the newspaper editor? Sure enough, he went there. And guess what they told him? They said, if you want it in the newspaper, you write it yourself. So my dad, Big Tino Celestino Gonzalez, wrote a weekly column called Noticias en Español. He wrote
it.
He wrote it.
He did do it.
And I would help him edit on Sunday nights, and he would turn it in on Monday mornings.
And would they publish it?
And they would publish it every week. The biggest complaint was from the non-Spanish-speaking community saying, we don't understand what he's saying.
Oh, it was written in...
It was all in Spanish.
Oh.
This is really cool. It was really cool.
It wasn't about the Latino community in English. It was in Spanish.
It was in Spanish.
That would be...
Yeah, so we switched it to bilingual after that. And so, yeah, all high school I was, helping him. At the same time, I started writing about sports and worked for that same newspaper covering high school sports all through high school. So I was 7th and 8th grade. I knew this is what I was going to do for a living.
And so when you got out of school... Where'd you first go? Where'd you work?
Worked for the Lansing State Journal for a year.
Okay.
But before, I did 3 internships in college. One in Holland at the Holland Sentinel, learned a lot about West Michigan. I did one in Bay City, learned about this area quite a bit, Flint, Saginaw, Bay City, Midland. And then I worked at the Detroit Free Press for a summer. And there, interesting. I wanted to be, my first incarnation was to be a music critic. So I worked as a music critic at the Detroit Free Press.
Really?
The summer of '87.
As an intern? As
an intern, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, well, we already had a music critic. I was his understudy.
Right.
But it was an incredible summer. I got to interview Reba McEntire, Alabama, Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith. I mean, I was the only one that listened to country music at the time. So they're like, oh, you listen to country music? Sure, you can do
Reba.
that. Yeah, Reba. I mean, this is like when she's early in her career.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun.
She's always been my favorite.
Oh, I've interviewed her multiple times since then, and she's always so sweet to talk. But yeah, so I did that. Went then Lansing, and then I worked in Flint at the Flint Journal for a year after Lansing, and then I went to Grand Rapids, and I was there for 32 years.
All
working at the press.
We'll take a break. Come back, chat more with John Gonzalez. He also is going to be interviewing a mutual friend of ours when he's down in Detroit, or is sometime soon thereafter. Let's put it that way, because of scheduling. We'll tell you about that.
Tax season is almost over.
All right, we're back with you here on WSGW. We're talking to John Gonzalez. John, former newspaper reporter. You hear him on Behind the Mitten with Amy Schumer. And then we also know that he is now the communications director for the Catholic Diocese in Saginaw. So, John, this is where it gets serious.
Okay, I'm ready.
The newspaper business is certainly not what it used to be.
Right.
What are your thoughts about what's happened to the newspaper industry? Because I know it's a part of your life. You lived it. You ate and breathed it.
Yeah. So I didn't expect you asking that question, but I love the question though, because I see what's happening in the industry right now, and it's tough, right? I mean, you think about when you would wake up on a Saturday morning and you could pick up your local newspaper, read the box scores from the sporting events, from the baseball games. You could read about the high school football scores from the night before. You could spend some time with it, right? You were busy during the week, but on Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings especially too, right? And you could sit there and just get caught up on the world and your local community. What was happening in your local community?
And that's the key. I mean, there used to be a pattern, if you will, of news. If something happened in the morning, radio was immediate. Told you about it right now, but in a synopsis form. Television would come along by midday and have pictures of it, and then at night you'd sit down and read all about it, get all the details you couldn't get from the other two. And that's out the window now. The other thing that worries me, who's keeping the history of these communities? If I want to know what happened in Saginaw in 1924, I can go to the library, look up the microfiche, and read all about it. Who's going to do that for 2025?
When this whole internet thing was happening and I could see where the future was going with the industry, I said, wait, who's going to clip the little newspaper article out about someone winning a spelling bee in 6th grade and putting up on the refrigerator and putting in a scrapbook for generations to come, right?
Yep.
What are you going to save a tweet or save a Facebook post or an Instagram photo? You're not going to do that, right? And I think we lose some of that connectivity through a local newspaper. You lose a little bit about who you are and who you are as a community. That's what I'm concerned about. And it's sad, but I hope. I think there are a lot of young people that are kind of fighting against it. You look at what's happening in the world today, and even in Michigan as well. There's this kind of a bent back to old times, not in a negative way, but this nostalgia is real. Spending some time really engaging with community and friends. I hope that there will be a little comeback for the hometown newspaper in a way, but we'll see.
But it's all driven by money.
It is.
And the funny story there is that for many years, Paul Chafee, who was the editor of the Saginaw News, he and I used to do a dog and pony show for the former Senator John Siskey, who was a professor at Saginaw Valley, and he had a 4th level criminal justice class that he taught. Twice a year, Paul and I would go in and talk about the media with these young people, some of whom were police officers, all looking for careers in law enforcement and had a great distrust of the media. But we used to go in and we'd do this little dog and pony show, and I would always start explaining the separation of the business side and the editorial side of a newspaper. How you'd walk in and you would see the publisher's office is down there and the editor's office is over there, and never the twain shall meet. And that went on for a couple of years until near the end of the Saginaw News high heyday. They named Paul editor and publisher. And that went right out the window. Right out the window. I mean, it was just so funny and yet at the same time sad. And Paul used to say 28 years to build it up, 28 days to tear it down.
Yeah. I ran into Paul not too long ago when I first started working here for the Catholic Diocese of Saginaw, and it was good to see him because I actually interviewed for an internship there at one point. So we were kind of reminiscing about that. But he's absolutely right, is that the news industry, we would have these great meetings about planning the coverage for the next day's newspaper or that weekend's newspaper, and you would talk about issues in the community. And we felt like it was almost a calling. It was almost like being a politician, right?
It was.
You wanted to serve your community through keeping those who have power, keep it in check, right? There's a checks and balances. You hear about that in government.
That's what the founding fathers envisioned.
Exactly. And if you don't have that, you can see what's going to happen.
Well, we don't have it.
We don't have it.
And that's what we do see what's happening on the national level in particular. The local level, most of it's been financial. But on the national level, most of it's been political.
Yeah.
And that's too bad because we all suffer from that.
We do. And so what I say is I think I encourage I speak to a lot of groups and organizations about how to convey their message through social media, through email newsletter, through marketing.
It's
right?
the new way.
It's the new way. So you have more power now as an individual or as a group to relay your message, right? And as long as you're doing it for the good causes, I mean, I'm willing to help anyone that wants to do that because that's what you need to do.
And it's become more of a way of life. Here in this building, our salespeople they deal with digital all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
And it's part of life now. I mean, you're not going to get away from it. The scary thing is how to control it. AI and all that coming on, and you really you shake your head sometimes. For an old goat like me, watching this transition from when I first got in the business in '63 till now, I mean, it's a different world.
It is a different world, and I think that there can be some good from it though too. There's some things in the AI world that are good.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's just a matter of like, are they going to be in the right hands?
Yeah, yeah. All right, so let's move on to some other things here.
Sure.
Because when you first alerted me to you're going down to the Tiger game, you had in mind to interview a mutual friend of ours.
I did, yes. So when I got a press release for the Tigers, because I'm still on their mailing list, as a journalist, I saw it says Michigan native and Grammy Award winner, Tony Award nominee Brian Darcy James to sing the national anthem. I'm like, what? A Saginaw kid is going to sing the national anthem. Obviously, he did for the Lions last fall, did the national anthem. So I said, I got to get him. And he's also from Nouvelle, right?
Right.
Which is in the Saginaw Diocese. And I'm like, our offices are right next to Saginaw Nouvelle, part of it. And I'm like, I've got to interview him for our podcast because we're doing a podcast at the diocese called United in Mission, One Heart and Mind. Anyway, so I called the Tigers and they're like, oh, it's going to be crazy. And I'm like, you know what? I'll just call his mom.
Yeah.
Mary. She's so sweet, by the way. It's the first time I talked to her, Art. You know her.
Oh, I've known her for years.
Yeah.
I knew his dad, too. I've known Brian a long time.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, we talked about that on the Behind the Mitten show, right? Of your long history with him.
Yeah.
And he does have a message for you, by the way.
Uh-oh.
Let me see if I can find it here really quick here. So I was texting him yesterday because we're going to interview. We'll do our interview for the podcast. We'll do that April 11th, and we'll have that on our website, saginaw.org. But he says, yeah, he goes, please do tell Art hello. He's the real reason Michigan Christmas is a song that anyone knows. I owe him many, many thanks.
Yeah, well, he did on his website and on an album cover, I think he did talk about that. And that story it's become legend, but
it has.
He was here for the FNI concert, the fundraiser for the Field Neurosciences Institute. And he brought a couple of his New York buddies with him. And they sang a whole bunch of songs. And one of the songs he wrote for the show. And he was going to do it for the show, and it was called A Michigan Christmas. And I'm in the audience, and I hear that, and I'm listening to that, and I'm watching the audience react to it. So the show's over, I go backstage. I say, Brian, you got to record that so I can play it. His two buddies said, he will. And that was that.
Wow.
And the next thing you knew, we had a recording, and we started playing it. And Mary, at the time, had a children's book company down here at the Antique Warehouse, she and her partner. A couple of thousand CDs later, they couldn't keep up with it. It was pretty funny.
That's incredible, But
it's an incredible song. It's enduring and it lasts, and it's one of those great pieces for people here because it's recognizable. He sings about stuff we all recognize.
I still think there's an opportunity for that song to reach a broader level because it's just so great at capturing what Michigan Christmas was like.
Yeah.
But that's Christmas anywhere in this country, right? As a kid growing up, you can relate to anything he sings about there. For me, I think there's you never know what's going to happen, but I predict that will happen again. I think that it has a chance to. It could be a Hallmark movie for that matter.
It could be,
right?
Yeah. Well, not that he doesn't have enough to do. I mean, he's a busy guy.
Yeah, he's got I think he's filming next week, so that's why we had trouble connecting our schedules here. But he's got that going on, and I know that he's hoping to see his mom when he's here for for the national anthem.
Maybe she'll go down there.
Maybe, yeah. I know that he's planning to see her at some point, but he said he's in and out really quick. But he's excited to be here and be part of the festivities for opening day. I can't wait. I mean, you've been to opening day, I'm sure, Art.
Yeah.
It's
different. It is different. It is different. But I'm not one. I have to tell you, you get a better view of the ball game at home, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, that's true.
When I go to a ballpark, I don't sit very long.
Yeah,
I'm wandering around, looking, standing by a rail. I'm not one just to sit and watch.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
it's an event.
It is an event, but to have Brian, to have a piece of Saginaw there on the field,
that makes it special.
It's going to be something else. And I'll tell you what, he's such a great guy. I mean, he was nice enough to call me back, text me back. We had a short conversation.
Well, he's a product of his mom and dad, and they were great people. She's a wonderful woman.
I don't know her very well than just talking to her. She was a sweetheart. But I will say this though. I mean, he in the Broadway circles. I mean, he is a name. People know who he is.
They know who he is. Yeah, absolutely.
And when I first got this job in Saginaw, I was like, "Holy cow!" I mean, Nouvelle. That's where Brian Darcy James went. And to think someone from Saginaw could go on. It's funny because I'm talking to people around the state, and what are you doing in Saginaw, right? And you start telling them about Saginaw a little bit more about it. They're like, "Oh, I guess I haven't been there in a while, right? I don't know much about Saginaw, right?"
Yeah. Well, and nobody does. It's one of those places.
Yeah.
We'll take a break. Come back. We're talking to John Gonzalez. You hear Gonzo on Behind the Mitten here on WSGW during the weekend, and we'll tell you more about that and more coming up after these notes.
The Gick Nursery and Garden Center.
And we're back with you on the Art Lewis Show. We're talking to John Gonzalez. You hear him on Behind the Mitten weekends here on WSGW, and he is also the communications director of the Catholic Diocese of Saginaw, and he's been there about 7 months. And how did you get there?
Oh, God, when you make a plan, God laughs, and comes up with his own plan, right? I was looking for another job in media, after my run there at MLive, and I was like, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do next? And I had a chance to go to Detroit and work for a major media company down there, and but it just didn't pan out. And I'm like, okay, well, now what? And long story short, he said, check the Catholic Diocese in Saginaw. And I was like, well, what am I going to be? A communications director, right? Like, that's just not me. I'm a journalist at heart. And sure enough, I met Bishop Gruss, who and the mission of this diocese just blew me away. They're doing things there that I have not seen in any other diocese around the country. Very innovative. He's on mission. He wants to, this is what I love about him, and I know you know this about Bishop Gruss, is that he sees himself as the bishop of the 11 counties, not just the Catholics, not the 60,000 people that say they're Catholic, right, in our region. Every single person in all those 11 counties, he feels he is here to help guide them spiritually. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's the way he is, though, when he's not riding his Harley.
No. I grew up cradle Catholic, and my parents are going to be saints someday. And you talk about good parents, right? We talk about Brian Darcy James, and had great parents, and why he's a good person. And I had incredible parents in the thumb there. So to me, if I can honor them in any way and follow what they were trying to lead by example, and if I can do that here in Saginaw, great.
That's the way I led my life too. I mean, my parents, they molded me as to who I am. Really, when you think about it, that's true of most of us. You're a product of your background, and I, being a native of New York City, I see things maybe a little differently than some people do around here, the way I grew up and the neighborhood I grew up in and how I relate to people. But still, I mean, a good person's a good person.
Yeah.
And most of it comes from your family.
Yeah, it does. And, and so we were blessed. You and I were both blessed. Brian Darcy James was blessed.
Oh, yeah.
Some of us aren't as lucky. And I think this is where if you're seeking something like, hey, I know there's something more out there, this is where an opportunity to see what we have going on the diocese. We've got a couple of big events coming up. On Friday, Bishop Gruss has his first Friday talk at the cathedral. 11 o'clock is Mass. At noon, he does a presentation to those that show up. Have you been to a First Friday before?
No.
Yeah,
I worked, remember?
But that's a great chance to meet him and talk to him. And then on Saturday, we have the men's conference over at Holy Spirit. It starts at 8 o'clock in the morning till, I think, 3 or 4 in the afternoon. But Bishop Gruss will kick off that. We've got a couple interesting speakers coming in to speak to that as well. So, yeah, and there's a lot going on in the diocese.
Well, I've been blessed by having 3 good friends who've been bishops. Ken Huttner was a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And Joe Sistone, Bishop Sistone, was another one of our very good friends who we went out with all the time. And Bishop Gruss now.
Yeah, we're blessed to have him. I will tell you that. If you have not been to church in a while or have not seen any of his videos, his Lenten series right now, which is available on Saginaw.org, please go check out his Lenten series. One video will show you who this person is and why you might want to consider either coming back to church or asking more questions about it.
Yeah, and he's his background is so unique. How many corporate pilots do you know become bishops?
A pilot who was engaged, who rides a motorcycle, who was, discerned the priesthood not till much later in life. I mean, that's God calling you there, right? So,
yeah. I joked with him. I think I told you this before, but the first time I'd had him on the air, and we talked about his background and the fact that he was engaged, and I said, well, Bishop, you erred. You should have become an Episcopalian priest first, because you could have stayed married. Then converted over to Catholicism, you would have been able to bring your wife with you.
That's true. You do know what you're talking about.
Didn't work out that way for him.
No. It's hard to be committed 2 places. But
yeah, I know it. I know it. So you're going to, you're late in your career, like
yes. Thanks.
You've been around a while.
Thanks for recognizing that I'm old. Yeah,
that's
thank
all right.
you. Thanks,
no
Art.
problem. My pleasure, John.
Yeah.
The job of communications director at the Catholic Diocese, was it what you expected it to be?
That and more. We have an incredible staff, which is more like family. In fact, that's what Bishop Gruss wants, is a family, not a staff, not a team meeting. You're just having a gathering, getting together. Yeah, we have incredible people, but extremely talented. I get to oversee our coverage and direction of where we're going from communications, internal and external. If you go to the website or check out our videos, I started a podcast, late last year, United in Mission, One Heart and Mind. We're bringing on local people, national people. I really believe in the mission, and I'm here to help all of our different departments communicate their message out there and reach people. So,
just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Have you been a practicing Catholic all your life?
I have. I mean, I think for the most part, I think everyone has their moments of like, what am I doing here? Like, this is probably not a good place to be at the moment. I can tell you some stories off the air about that. But, as an intern in Detroit, yeah, I went to Cincinnati. You'll love this one. I went to Cincinnati to cover the Run DMC and the Beastie Boys, and I'm an intern. And I found myself at a house party after the show. Like, I should not be at a house party in Cincinnati where their gunfire goes off. And I'm like, Lord, please save me, right? But, you find yourself in situations where you learn. Raised my kids Catholic. They're all Catholic. They're all raising their families Catholic. Just been blessed, I think we all have moments where we're like not sure where this is all going.
Well, you have to find yourself and your belief. I mean, and you're led there because you're born into it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a Jewish kid from the Bronx. I was born into it.
Mm-hmm.
As it happens, I did one of those, heritage analysis checks, the 23andMe thing. It turns out I'm 99.2% Ashkenazi Jewish. I didn't know that was something in your blood. I didn't realize that was a DNA marker.
Yeah.
But it is.
Wow.
That surprised me.
I think I'm not 10%. I think I'm 1% Nigerian.
No.
And Middle East, and I got a little Middle Eastern too.
Oh, I've got that. Interesting.
It is interesting.
We're going to take a pause here. We're talking to John Gonzalez. We'll have one more segment with him when we return here on the Art Lewis Show, where I want to talk to you about Quick Lane Freeland, right next to my car dealer, McDonald Ford. And everybody asks, well, you keep